UFC 287, we have Gilbert Burns facing Jorge Masvidal. I'm going to give you guys both the fighters' strengths, both the fighters' weaknesses, and then move on to my prediction as to how the fight is going to go. Let's get straight to it. Gilbert Burns, what are one of his strengths? I'll read it out here. BJJ, Jiu-Jitsu. This guy has it all. He has won first place in the IBJJF World Championship in 2011. Same competition with no gi in 2010. First place at the UAJJF Abu Dhabi World Pro in 2010. The list goes on. The guy has got brilliant submissions. Evidence I have shown you. This guy is brilliant on the ground. He is crafty on the ground. He has used his BJJ to get many finishes in the UFC. And maybe he's going to use it again against Masvidal. He definitely has the superior jiu-jitsu, but Masvidal is also rather decent on the ground. Not to the level of Burns, but he is relatively decent. So strength number one for Burns is his Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Okay, and number two, there is a cat running around, sorry. Number two is Burns' double leg takedowns along the fence specifically. There's a reason he uses it as a common technique. His power punches are remarkably effective at convincing an opponent to keep his guard very high, at which point he will push them back. He will almost push them back against the cage with this pressure, throw these big heavy punches, which means his opponent will get his guard high, and then he shoots for the double leg takedown, which is one of his brilliant strengths that he could use against Jorge Masvidal. Number three for Burns is his clinch throws. His clinch throws are brilliant. He's thrown off some wonderful ones. He usually locks his hands and gains the outside position with his knee. Again, some great examples of this against Nelson. He used the overhook, threw a counter to Nelson's forward pressure and put him on his back. And Nelson is known for being good on his back. He did this against Woodley. He managed to get him to the ground. Used this against Nelson, got him to the ground with his good hip throws. So that is definitely another great strength. In general, his clinch work is brilliant, and he uses clinch throws, judo throws to get his opponents on the ground all the time. And then, as I've mentioned before, his power is good. Everything he throws is simple, but there are fighters out there who throw to not damage, sometimes just to get points or to distract their opponent or to even just annoy their opponent, get them frustrated. You know, fighters like Nate Diaz who throw the jab all the time just to annoy the other fighter. This guy, when he throws, is looking to damage the opponent every time he throws. His kicks are powerful, his punches are powerful, he is a power puncher, and I think he will be looking to use this to his advantage against Jorge Masvidal. Now, we move on to his weaknesses. Striking wise, he is not as technical as Masvidal. Masvidal is a much more technical striker. I'll move on to that with Masvidal's strengths. But the difference between Burns and Masvidal is Burns throws these heavy punches to make damage, to gain or to inflict damage, on his opponent. He throws them with power, with aggressiveness, but he's not as technical. And what do I mean by that? I mean that Masvidal is better at controlling range, that Masvidal has better head movement. Masvidal doesn't have as much damage, but he throws quicker. He's sharper. Obviously, he's had some time outside the octagon, but I'm just judging off when we last saw him, or the previous few fights we saw him. He is quick, he's got good head movement, he's a crafty fighter compared to Burns, which is a weakness for Burns. The next one, eats leg kicks. Now, you may say to me, Burns has never been leg kicked out of a fight, never hurt his leg that badly, but he does get leg kicked a lot. Now, how does that present us with a problem? Firstly, it takes away his power from his strikes, as all the weight goes on the front foot when you throw these strikes. Secondly, you lose points. If it goes to a decision, leg kicks will be looked at, and the guy takes too many leg kicks, and something he needs to look at is defending them, either by avoiding them or checking them, but he does get leg kicked a lot. And my third point, my third weakness of Gilbert Burns is that he likes a brawl. Now, there is a positive and a negative to this. Entertainment-wise, it's brilliant. I mean, we saw the Khamzat Chimaev fight, Burns fight. I thought it was great. A great brawl. It was fun, but maybe he'd be better off sometimes not getting into a brawl. He's not got the best chin. Another weakness I could have put down, but it's not that much of a weakness. He's a bit chinny, and getting into these brawls is dangerous in that sense. He could be knocked out. He could take strikes that he doesn't need to, and he often does this when he loads up the when he does take these strikes in these brawls is because he puts so much emphasis on the power of his shots. He's loading up these shots with more power, which means they take more time to load up. And that's when he gets caught usually, is halfway through loading up a shot, whether that be a hook, which he's good at, he's great with his hooks, or a kick, his leg kicks are great. He'll be loading up and then get caught. And that's why I think, for me, brawls are his weakness. As much as they're fun for us to watch, we love them. I would love to see a brawl against Masvidal. It's probably not the best way to go forward for him. Now, we move to Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, the guy who has been outside the octagon for a while. A popular fighter. Now, let's look at what are his positives, right? Let's talk about his range management. His range management and finding the range is very good. An example against Till had a significant height and reach advantage, and he made good use of it with his sharp left straight, which is the only bloody punch this guy, Darren Till, has, but he was effective with it. And I think it took him a few rounds to get into it, 1 or 2 rounds to sort of figure that out. But once he was able to learn the timing of the punch, he was brilliant. He was able to counter by slipping inside, and he'd throw a looping overhand or a hook over the shoulder. And I think he's great at that range management. And alongside that, his neck strength, which his strengths sort of work together really well, if I may say so myself. But his jab is of great importance. It has let him down maybe 1 or 2 fights, but in general, his jab is brilliant. Now, his jab is snappy, it's quick, it's hard, and it shoots out brilliantly. And yeah, I love his jab, and I think that works really well with his distance or management of distance. And I think that's what also allows him to manage the distance. You know, he throws the jab just to see how far his opponent is, and he's a great judge of how far he should be, if he's in the pocket, if he needs to step away. And unfortunately against Usman, he failed at that when he got knocked out. But Usman is a great fighter, let's be honest, and I think that in general, as much as his range distance management didn't help him in that instance when he got knocked out, his distance management and range management is good most of the time, 90% of the time. Also, paired alongside a good jab, he is very effective. And then again, he is slick. And what I mean by slick is he slips out of the way of punches really well. He's got excellent range control, and this allows him, again, with the range control, to rely on reaction time to defend himself effectively. So all of his strengths sort of complement each other and they boost up the rating of each of his strengths. With a good jab comes good distance management. With good distance management comes good slickness, good head movement. So they all complement each other rather nicely. And then another one, I think, is experience. He'd had 29 fights when Gilbert made his debut. Gilbert Burns made his debut in the fight game in the UFC or MMA, one or the other, I'm not sure. But to have 29 fights over someone when they make their first MMA or UFC debut is a strength for Masvidal. However, we're going to move on to the weaknesses, which he gets held up against the cage very easily. So if we look at the Usman fight or the Colby Covington fight, the guy got held on the cage for minutes at a time. And when you have a guy who is good at using the cage and clinching like Gilbert Burns, this isn't something that's very, very positive. A weakness is never going to be a positive, but it becomes more of a weakness. Now, time out of the octagon, another one. He has the experience, but he's not been in the octagon for a long time. Gilbert Burns has been in that octagon present numerous amounts of times within the last 3 or 4 years, and he's been fighting good fighters. He's come off a great win. I think he's just come off a win. He had the Khamzat Chimaev, and I think that's one of the times where someone who has lost has come off the best. He went up in people's rankings after that loss I think it's the most anyone has ever gone up in people's books after a loss. And yeah, so time out of the octagon for Masvidal. Gilbert's been consistent. And then I'd like to say, Gamebred Masvidal, Jorge Masvidal, has good takedown defense. Don't get me wrong, he has good takedown defense. It's at 72-ish%. But his single leg takedown isn't very good. So he struggles with fighters who like to throw that single leg takedown. He is good with dealing with the double leg, but he is not very good at defending the single leg takedown. It's where he struggles. It's where Colby got him on the ground. It's where Usman got him on the ground where he wanted to. And, you know, apart from that, yes, his defense is incredible. He has a tall stance, but his hips are very difficult to penetrate. His hips are hard to penetrate in terms of wrestling, not sex. But his single leg defense for me is not the best, and something that Gilbert Burns could definitely exploit. With regards to my prediction, let me just say this. I think that this fight is much more even than people like to say. Now, this is another question, this fight, of whether a fighter is completely washed or not. We're going to have that with McGregor Chandler. We had that with John Jones Garn, whether John Jones is completely washed. And this is going to be the same with Masvidal. Granted, him not being completely washed won't win him the fight. I think they're very even fighters. But for me, I'm going to go with Gilbert Burns. Now, why do I go with Gilbert Burns? Well, number one, I think that Masvidal struggles with fighters that are good against the cage at clinch work. Gilbert Burns is a master of that. Jorge Masvidal has a good takedown defense, but he's not very good at dealing with single leg takedowns. Gilbert Burns is good at that. So, it seems to me that a lot of these weaknesses that Jorge Masvidal has, in line with the fact that he's not been in the octagon for a long time, point for me at Burns being better. Now, granted, if Masvidal can keep the fight on the feet, he is a better striker. Maybe he doesn't have as much power, but he's much more accurate, he's slicker, and I think that's the way he wins, keeping this fight up on the feet. I think it's obvious to everyone that this is the way that Masvidal does win the fight. But the real question is, can he deal with someone who's going to hold him up against the cage, tire him down, and then use power shots to try and knock him out, or hold him up against the cage and then take him down and use BJJ against him? Masvidal has a good BJJ game, but we can't lie and we cannot say that he is better than Burns at BJJ. Burns has all the accolades in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think really, when it comes down to it, I'm going to go with Burns, and I'm going to go with either decision or submission because of the weaknesses that Jorge Masvidal has and how these complement Burns nicely. So Burns via decision or submission. I'm not sure what to go with, but please let me know what you guys think. Are you leaning towards Burns, or are you going to lean towards Masvidal, who's not been in the octagon for a long time? I just want to say a big thank you to you guys. You guys smashed it with my last video. I had a lot of comments saying I look like Tom Aspinall. I've realised I've shaved, which makes me look less like him. And you guys are going to say that you did that because we called you Tom Aspinall. I did it before, but I am going to be regrowing it. Now you guys have called me Tom Aspinall, and we'll keep that going. So thank you guys for that. But no, you guys, you support me and you are great. So thank you for the likes, thank you for the comments and the subscribers. It means the world to me, and I will talk to you in the next video. Thank you very much.